Done it with record. All right, we're live. Here we go. 3, 2, 1. Joining us here on Sports Spectrum today is Dan Orlovsky. You know Dan, ESPN football analyst, and just excited to talk to Dan. Long time in the NFL with the Lions, Texans, Colts, and the Bucks. Back to the Lions and retired here on Sports Spectrum, actually, in the fall of 2017. He's been on the show a couple times, and we welcome him back now. We figure with the pandemic, Dan, you got nothing going on. You got all the time in the world, right? Welcome, buddy.
Yeah, I haven't talked to a screen at all here recently. No, it's awesome to be with you, man. I'm excited to sit down.
Yeah, this is like your whole life right now. It feels like is sitting at home. ESPN sends you the at-home kind of system set up, and this is probably, something that you've had to get used to, but I'm sure you're missing real people just like I am.
Oh, big time, man. It's wild that this period has taught you so much, different people, different things, but I realized how much I miss just being around the people that I work with, like, seeing Marcus Spears at 5:30 in the morning, and he just gives you these massive beer hugs. This is every time you see Marcus. The same with Jalen Rose, like this embrace. And so it's certainly missed that. It's certainly been a unique time frame, but one that has also taught us a lot. So in many ways, it's been a learning experience.
That's good, man. I've been loving watching you on shows, and certainly we're going to talk a little bit about what that's been like, and the status, if you want to call it that. I know you don't like that word, and I probably don't either, but just for an interview purpose, saying how the elevated status and the opportunities that you're getting has been great. I wonder though, as I was watching last week, we were all watching the draft and just craving like real sports and being able to kind of get into it. Was the draft something that you paid attention to when you played? Was that something that you were like locked in on and kind of preparing yourself for a post career, maybe as a broadcaster, or was it something that you were just like, I went through
No,
that?
I watched the draft pretty religiously. One, I'm a fan before anything, and obviously as a player, and then two, I'll be honest with you, man. A lot of times I was watching the draft, being like, all right, are we gonna draft a quarterback? Is my job really on the line? It really started. It was my second year in the NFL. We took Drew Stanton. I was with the Lions, and we took Drew Stanton, who is a Michigan kid, and obviously went to Michigan State and had an incredible career there. We took him like the third pick of the second round. So immediately I was like, oh, okay, here we go. So yeah. I've always watched it with like an eye of, professional career aspect or getting back to that. But also, certainly as I got near the end of my career, I watched it a little bit more with a fine eye of, hoping to be a part of it someday in the television world.
I love the draft. I like seeing players come to new teams, and just when it all comes down to it, though, it's really hard to be a draft grader expert. Like you and I can sit there and look at. We'll choose our two teams that we kind of go back and forth a little bit on. We'll look at Dallas and we'll look at Philly, right, and say who has a better draft. But we really don't know, do we? I mean, it's really hard to evaluate. It's easy to evaluate based upon what they did in college, but we don't know the success of what a draft is until 1 or 2 years down the road, right?
Yeah, and there's so many aspects that are variables that determine the player's success. Like how do they adjust going from the college life to the real world life, and how do they adjust now having money? A lot of these kids don't have any type of money, and all of a sudden now they have a ton of money. Yeah. How do they create boundaries in their lives for their friends and families? How quickly they can adapt to their new city, and then new teammates and new kind of everyday life with work, and the temptations that come with that, and the challenges that, just don't know. That's the hardest part, is how those guys can adapt to all that stuff. And then we haven't even really talked about how do they adapt on the field, right. How do they transition to the field? And so that's why it's so hard. And that's why good organizations usually are more successful than others on a consistent basis, because they're well run from the top down. They've seen everything. They know how to handle so many different things. Their locker room controls a lot. Yeah. So, but we don't really know.
Dan Orlovsky is our guest here on Sports Spectrum. We'll get back to football in a second, but I got a little surprise for you. So I didn't tell you about this, but I hear your name popping up in different times in my ministry that I work with Sports Spectrum and with Pro Athletes Outreach and PAO. And you had a profound impact on a lot of different people, especially from a faith aspect. So you're going to like this. I'm going to welcome in here Mallory Brown. Say hi, Mallory.
Hi, guys.
What up,
Dan,
Mal?
say hi to Mal.
What's going on?
Not much. Nothing. We miss you. How are you doing?
Miss you guys. We're good. We're good. Thank you. Miss you guys too. I talk to Donald occasionally about what you guys are doing, and he asks me to join a call, and I'm like, oh, I'm gonna be on SportsCenter that time, dude. I'm sorry, I can't. So.
Totally. And he's on a Bible study call right now with Nate Soldier. That's like routine every Thursday. He's like, but maybe if I finish quickly, I'll jump in. But the fact that we even say he's on a Bible study call could be very comical if it wasn't for you. I mean, I shout your name from the mountaintop all day long from our ministry perspective. And then we always go back to the story of like the seed being sown. And I wouldn't be working in a minute. I mean, it just blows my mind. Like the legacy of your impact, even like generationally for our whole little tribe. It's just, I will refrain from getting emotional, but it is the coolest thing. I mean,
all right, hold on, Mallory. Let me do my proper job as a broadcaster and introduce you. No, this is fine. Mallory Brown is the wife of Donald Brown. Donald played with Dan, and they know each other very well from, I guess, college days as well as the NFL, right, Dan? Yeah. And so Mallory and Donald, whenever I've come in contact with them, Donald works with IJM, International Justice Mission now, and Mallory works with me in the ministry that Sports Spectrum is owned by, Pro Athletes Outreach. And she does, and I'm going to brag about you second, Mallory. You do a great job connecting to the wives of professional athletes. Fantastic. One of the best you'll ever be around is Mallory. But oftentimes we'll ask her, like, tell us your testimony and tell us your story. And she brings up my longtime friend, Dan Orlovsky. So I was like, all right, I got Dan on the show tonight. Why don't we bring Mallory in here and have her share the story of why Dan impacted you so much? So Mallory, why don't you share and then we'll have Dan react.
I feel like the quickest recap. So yeah, Dan was signed with the Indianapolis Colts. Dan, I don't remember what year. Was it 11?
2011, yes.
Okay. His amazing wife, Tiff, was pregnant with triplets. Mm-hmm. Donald and I lived in a large home in Indiana and had space. And Donald said, hey, would you mind? You don't really, actually I can't remember, Dan, did we go to Mexico before we let you live with us?
Yeah.
Okay. So I had known Dan. So Dan invited us on a really fun trip. We were with the same agency. So there was some like decent relational equity there. However, Donald had said, okay, you remember Dan? We went on vacation with him. He's with A1. What do you think if for the season he lived with us? We had abundant space. And I said, yeah, sure. Why not? And truth be told, had I known the strength of like Dan's vertical relationship with the Lord, I don't know if I would have said yes, just being very honest. But I think what Dan had done really well, and Donald and I always say this, and I think it's helped us in the posture of discipleship, he was the most non-judgmental, but authentic Christian. I mean, he was around the two of us, unmarried, probably not healthy, spiritually, emotionally, mentally, and there was never a condemning spirit about him, but he kind of rode the course of our lives with us for at least those 6 months prior. And so we said, yeah, come into our world of total chaos. And to be very transparent, like Donald and I were probably at our lowest when we welcomed like the most holy vessel into our home, unbeknownst to us. And so we did literally life on life together for an entire season with the Colts. And man, I mean, what's really cool when I go back to like those years, like, I don't really know. I mean, Dan lived in our basement, which was like a decent setup, but I don't even know how much I don't know how good we were at covering up our life, Donald and I. And I'm sure there were some things I could only think now, like, I don't know if I could have done what Dan did, like moved into a home with two non-Christians, maybe seeking, and just assumed a posture of authentic Christ-like love, like truly like owning the statement, like, come as you are. I'm here to just minister in your season of life. And so lo and behold, Dan's thank you to us after living with us through a season. And I can only fathom again, what his phone calls were like to his wife. He's probably like, these two young sinners are like killing me, but I'm in their home and I got to respect him. But again, his non-judgmental posture of Christianity is what inevitably drew us to the Lord, like unbeknownst to us. And then his thank you to us was inviting us to the Ministry of PAO's conference in Orlando. And here we are. And I think it's incredible. Like, I had the privilege of thanking John and Jenny Kitna last year at PAO face to face, being like, if you never poured into Dan, he would have never poured into us and I wouldn't be here. And thank you, Jason, for your words. But like, I think I'm the perfect example of Matt Chandler says this. He says, I was a pompous, like righteous womanizer, like verbose person, and the Lord took all of that and used it for him. And not that I'm the same person, but I had drive and motivation and like power to foster community, and I was doing that in all the wrong places. And then because of Dan's like kind and merciful and grace-bearing like influence on us as a couple, and continued over the years, but from a distance, I mean, it just was able to draw us into a very new infancy relationship with the Lord, but then just, I don't know. I mean, it's like this is a sweet opportunity to just like say like eternal gratitude and thank you, because genuinely, like if you laugh kind of like, if you think about it, like if Dan never lived with us, I think we'd be divorced. I don't even know if we would have had a kid, honestly. And I will text him maybe like 4 times a year and just say, thank you. Like, thank you for modeling Christ-like love in a way that was enticing and approachable and just real. Like, you're the real deal, Dan. Like, you and Tiff are just great people, great parents. And you set a standard of excellence that's attainable because it's done in love. And it is a privilege to thank you tearfully through this medium, because it is, without your influence in our life, we would be broken beyond broken individuals. So thank you. Thank you.
That's awesome. Mallory, I'm going to let Dan respond, but I'm going to let you go. I know you have to go and run and get back to parenting and all the other great things that you're doing. This was awesome. And Dan and I will react to what you just said in a second, but thank you so much.
Love you guys. Thank you, Jason.
Love you guys.
Thanks, Mallory.
Bye.
See ya.
Bye.
Well, so I put you on the spot there, buddy. I didn't mean to throw you into the fire a little bit, but I think it really, I guess, let me just have you react to what Mal said.
Yeah. I'm an emotional person, so
I
will probably get emotional. Obviously those are incredible words to hear, as humbling as anything you can hear, to be honest with you. And, she's spot on with John and Jenny Kitna. I also lived with them for a brief amount of time. And, I was a knucklehead, man. And I was everything that you kind of, at least I didn't want to ever become. And I think the emotion is like when you hear someone say that, you would be, if not for God going, I'm going to put that person in your life in that moment. And then God taking another person, Josh McCown, and putting him in my life. And then Mike Furry, and then Dave Wilson. And then people like Don and Mallory. And so like, it's just super humbling to hear. And it's super emotional. It's very encouraging and motivating, but yeah.
Well, that's part of why, I was telling Mallory and our team actually Tuesday in our call that you and I were going to do this interview, and somebody else mentioned you should have Mallory come on. And I thought, that's a great idea. And then I'm going to be quite honest, and Mallory will tell you, I texted her like 5 minutes ago and I said, I completely forgot, but would you be able to join us? Thankfully, with technology, it happened fast and she was able to come on. But I really, as I listened to her and I listened to you, I want the people watching and listening to this to hear your words on you being the knucklehead, right? And coming in, and somebody just came in and showed love and cared for you and didn't shy away from the gospel though either. And yet then I want you to kind of go back into the moment when you were going into living with Mallory and Donald Brown. We're talking about Donald Brown in case people didn't hear the full name. You remember him, the running back from the Colts. I want people to understand where maybe your thoughts process was. Were you out there to kind of get someone saved for Christ, or were you there literally just to love them and then God did the rest? Can you kind of walk us through that journey? Start with you being that person being poured into, and then you taking the idea to pour into someone else.
Yeah, the easiest way for me to put it is when I was early in my career with Detroit and I was around people like John Kitna and Dave Wilson and Mike Furry and Josh McCown, their life just looked appealing to me. And it wasn't the cars they drove or the homes they had. It was like, you know, everything that I had thought that looked like a full and fun and enjoyable life, they were leading and they were experiencing, and then they would like talk about it with me, and then I would hear them talk about it with each other. And so I watched these guys and I was like, yeah, that's what I'm looking for. And they never once were forcing it on me. They never once were like, this is the only way to do things, or you should do this. It was just they were living and living purposefully in a way, I guess you want to call it. And that was what was so, appealing and enticing to me. And it was captivating. It drew me in. And then, and I after I experienced that and experienced like my transformation, when I went to Indy to live with them, Mallory said it, and I'll keep it real as well, Jason. Like,
yeah,
they were wild at first. They were a totally different space in their life than I was, and they were wild, in not a bad way. They just were young and immature and worldly. And I just remember thinking to myself, they're me. This is me.
Yeah.
6 years ago, this is me. And I've seen what they become if they don't have people in their life like I did. And so, yes, it was in a way purposeful, but it was also in a way, this is the only way that I know how to live anymore. This is the only way that I know how not to become what I was becoming, which was going to be a destitute, brokenhearted, empty, spiteful, angry, womanizing, narcissistic person. That was the only way.
Yeah.
And that was a lot of the adjectives that I would use to describe kind of, I guess, the vibe of their early relationship. And I just wanted to say, like, okay, I just got cut from the Texans off of a contract I did not expect. This was the year of the NFL lockout. Somehow I'm going to the Indianapolis Colts, who have Peyton Manning and a kid that I know from college football. And my wife can't live with me because she's pregnant with our triplets. I can't not live in Indy. And these people have their house. And I was just like, you're sending me a lot of signs here, And so it was certainly a period of obedience as well, that the door was opened for me to walk into their home. And my whole goal was I wanted to be the vision of Jesus to them. I just wanted to try and be the vision of Jesus to them, the modeling of Jesus. Failed every day, but I wanted to try to show that to them so they would fall in love with what it could look like, the way I did with Dave Wilson and Kitna, McCown, and Furry.
And they did. I mean, I can just attest to knowing both Donald and Mallory now. I haven't found two more on fire people for the Lord, especially Mallory, who has such a heart for women and the wives of athletes, and knows what that lifestyle is like, and has seen what it can be like when you enjoy the fruits of the Spirit, if you will, with the Lord. Let me ask you, when you started seeing moments where Mallory and Donald, and this is just more of as an example, I wanted to encourage the listeners who are, friends with someone who might be not living that great life, right? And yet was it questions that came that they kind of talked to you about that allowed you to share faith? Or you guys had like some real deep conversations?
Yeah, we had some real deep conversations. I was always super transparent with them. They kind of knew where I stood when it came to a lot of different things in life. And they started to ask questions. Sometimes it was like just a personal individual thing. And then sometimes it was marriage and whatnot, and then I think, again, another wild thing that you just realize, like, God piecing all this together was, my wife, again, is pregnant with triplets, and my wife's about a 5'2", 100-pound person, right? And so she's got this stomach that's out to here. And the reason she couldn't live with us is she's high risk. She had to be at UPenn. And so I would be spending so much time in my word, praying over my wife and kids, because we had gotten kind of guidance from doctors saying, you should not have all three of these kids. You should do something.
Hmm.
And obviously, you know what I'm getting to. And so,
Of course.
that was never a conversation to us, but it was obviously scary. And so I would be spending so much time in the Word praying over it. And that generated a lot of questions from Mallory and Donald. And, what are you reading? Why you were reading it? What does that mean? And that sparked so many conversations about not just having kids, but about marriage and my walk and my kind of transformation, all those things that I think really started. There were always questions that they had maybe inside of them or wanted to ask, but they never maybe felt comfortable enough to ask somebody. And I think that sparked a lot of both individual conflict within them in conversation, but also, horizontal as well.
Dan Orlovsky is joining us here on Sports Spectrum. Thank you for sharing all that. I know you weren't expecting to talk about a lot of that, but I think it really opened up a conversation for a lot of people who struggle as believers. And how do I go and make disciples and be the great, follow the Great Commission as Jesus calls us to, but at the same time, you don't want to alienate people and you don't want to, push them away. So I'm so glad Mallory came on and so glad you shared that. What's quarantine life been like for you? Certainly we've seen it from a broadcasting side and kind of what you discussed earlier, but just from being home all the time, having all this time with your kids. You mentioned the triplets and the triplets are there and you have another child as well. So you have 4 and your wife, and just being home all the time and maybe spiritually what the Lord has shown you during this time.
Yeah, being home has been awesome. I've been busy, yes, but being home has been awesome because we've gotten to spend more time together as a family, as everybody has. We've kind of, learned a lot about myself and my wife and our children. It's this wild thing. I was talking to my wife last night about it, and I said, man, one of my biggest fears during this whole time is that we just get content and we get complacent. And we get complacent with not having any urgency within our day. And we get complacent with just being at home and not having this kind of spirit of going and learning and being and doing. I will say one of the great growth processes that I've had in this quarantine with our kids is, I'm a doer. I like to accomplish things. I'm a task person. Yep. And sometimes I've fallen into that trap with my kids. They're like, no, let's go do this something. Let's go do something. Let's go do. And what I've realized is, and this live in Connecticut, so part of it is the weather is kind of, facilitated this as well, is like, yeah, my kids don't really want me to be the doer. It's more important for me to be with them than to do with them. And that doesn't mean that I don't go do things with them, but sometimes, and I think more often than not, Jay, it's my kids just want me to be with them, and they just want me to, like, if they're playing Legos, they want me to be with them, sitting next to them playing Legos, or if they're reading a book, they just want me to be with them, next to them, reading a book. It's not that they don't want to become independent, and it's not that I don't want that of them. But it's kind of flipped my viewpoint of that I used to think or feel like the doing was more important. And I really think that quarantine has taught me that the being is more important, just being with them. And then, part of it is their age, but it's definitely forced us to sit down and talk more about faith. Yeah. Maybe because we have more time, maybe because what we're going through, we've done some stuff as a family where we've brought in people food and gone to the store and picked up and paid for people's food and brought it to their homes, or paid for people's bills, or sent hospitals. And I think that in the past we may have done something like that and just like checked it off, but now we sit down and talk to them about like, hey, we're going to send this hospital dinner. And they're like, well, why? Yeah. And okay, here's a great teaching moment. And so also, sitting down and talking about, we have our children's Bible. And so we'll read a story. And a lot of times when the busyness of life it's like, I read our story. Okay, good night, guys. And now we'll read the story and be like, did you guys get it? Like, what did you learn? What did you learn from Noah's Ark? It's not really about an ark. It's about, and so it's certainly been a really positive time in our home.
That's good. That's good. Let me ask you about, I want to pivot back to a little bit of football, but not as much about just the, what you see on the field or whatever. And I know you do great work studying tape and studying film and evaluating, but the reactions from people, we talked about this the last time you were on, and you and I taped an interview in person for our podcast back last July or August. I think it was last summer. I think it was in August of 2019. And we talked about the Twitter trolls, and you were really good, I thought, in your answer then. But I wonder, even now, you've gone through a full NFL season, including the draft now. And, the trolls seem to get bigger and bigger the more opportunities you get to be on television. You realize a lot of people watch ESPN, and a lot of people watch Get Up and First Take and these shows that you're on. And then the other day, even, I'm not here to point out any flaws, but the Quincy Carter thing, and you say something on ESPN and you corrected yourself. People actually watched the show. You corrected yourself right away. But of course, on Twitter, we'll take the 3-second soundbite and we'll just put it out there. And you had to do a lot of kind of defending you didn't have to, but you just decided to do a lot of defending yourself in a lot of ways, in a great way, I thought. But how have you evolved, I guess, in your short journey as a broadcaster to be able to respond and handle, these Twitter bullies and their opinions?
I would say this: 9 out of 10 times the Twitter bully just wants you to think that they matter in a good way.
Yeah.
They just
like they have value.
Often, yeah. Like, so often people will say some of the nastiest stuff to me. And I try to do my best to respond back with like, hey man, I'm sorry you feel that way, or hey, that's not what I said, or let's talk about this. And I'm telling you, 9 out of 10 times they'll come back to me and be like, I can't even believe you responded to someone like me.
Yeah.
And we live in a world with the social media thing, and I've had people tell me like, do not talk to them at all, ignore them.
Yeah.
And I get that. But I also don't know what one impact of me responding to somebody who says something nasty to me. What happens if I go to them and be like, hey, man, listen, bud, like, I'm really sorry you feel that way. I hope you're safe and you're doing well and your family's good. And my job is to change your mind. And Jason, I've experienced it where people will come back and be like, dude, I'm sorry for what I said. It's just been a tough time. I appreciate that, or something like that. Literally yesterday, a dozen times I would respond back to somebody and like, again, in a positive way. And they'll come back to me like, I'm sorry, man. Like, like I did, but what do you think about what did you think about the Raiders draft? People just want to think that you think that they're not nobody. And so it's a fine balance. Don't get me wrong. And it's a challenge, but I've tried to take the approach of like, listen, if someone wants to say something nasty, I don't think they actually mean it. I think this is anger from something else, or hurt from somewhere else, or they're just trying to get my attention. And maybe I can use that one bad moment that they might have to turn it into a good moment. And it might change the way that they interact with people, whether on social media or real life. So I've tried to take a little bit more of a hands-on approach to it rather than the ignoring approach.
No, I think it's smart. And I remember even working at ESPN, but even since then, and people would say, or people would ask me, what do you think that athletes or people in a public forum should do with the trolls? They call them the trolls, the bullies, whatever you want to call them on social media. And I always said, listen, just exercise caution. I usually say ignore them, but I think you make a really good point. And if you're going to come back at them, because I have to imagine you're human too, right, Dan? I mean, it's got to be a little bit frustrating or painful or just exhausting sometimes to see someone say something about you and they've never met you, right?
Well, that, and a lot of times, to your point originally, it's something that you said is they take the 3 seconds instead of the 20, or they take it out of context, which is part of it. And yeah, I mean, listen, I wouldn't have a job if we didn't have people that were passionate about sports and what are getting said about their sports or their sports teams or whatnot. And so that's why I can't necessarily, I am human. And does it hurt? Like, no, you get frustrated by it. Yes. But like that's part of this. That is part of this.
It's what you signed up for. Yeah.
And without it, I don't have the job, like I don't have it. I don't get to do what I love to do. And so, yeah, they don't know me. But that's not enough for me to go, you know what, you don't have a blue check, so I'm not going to respond to you, And so I try to do my best to respond to people and say, hey, like there was a kid this morning who in his bio, he said something not okay to me, right?
Right.
And in
Yeah.
his bio, he's got Corinthians 15:58 written in there. So
Mm.
I just responded back with the verse written out to him. I said, man, I love this verse. Keep living for God. And that's it. And he came back to me and said, like, hey, man, that's awesome. I'm sorry, you know? And so that kid I don't know what he's dealing with. I don't know
Right.
what he's, you know? And so maybe that one interaction of that, rather than me going, oh, you know, might have a profound impact on him.
That's really good. I appreciate your time here on the show, Dan. This has been really great. Let me close with, I guess, two quick questions. The first is, do you think football is going to be the same in the fall? You know, going on the field, do you think you've probably been asked this question. Maybe you haven't.
Yeah.
I don't know. I assume you have. In the past, you know, 70,000 fans screaming in a stadium. I don't think that's possible, but what are your thoughts here? I mean, as far as where we stand today, it could change tomorrow for all we know, but do you think there's going to be football? And if so, what's it going to look like?
I think we'll have football. I do.
Yeah.
I think we'll have football. America is an entertainment country, and the biggest entertainment is football. And that's what we want, and we crave, and we love it. Will there be fans? I would say this, Jason. If the worst part, I don't want to say that. When it comes to the NFL or football, if the worst part of this is that we don't have fans in the seats for a stadium or for a season, is that really that bad? You know, like,
I mean, I watch the games on TV anyways. It's more pleasurable.
Is that really that bad? You know, like, I know that tomorrow's not promised, and I know, but like, if that helps us in every other aspect of our life, and it kind of ensures a 2021 season that's relatively more normal, then if that's the worst thing that we got to jump over, is it that bad of a gig? If it's that bad. And so, you know, pushing the fans in the stadium for me is something that I'm struggling to understand why people are pushing it.
Yeah.
I think with college football, we need to have college football. There's no chance we can't have college football because of the financial ramifications. The tradition is much greater in college football, and the camaraderie is much greater. So that would be sad. It would be different if we don't have Michigan, Ohio State for rivalry week, or USC, UCLA. But again, if we have football, I'll be so happy, because that means that at that point, we're in a much better place then than we are now. And for me, that's a view of progress.
Yeah, that's a big win. The question we always ask on the show, we've asked it to you a couple times. Maybe you alluded to it a little bit during the quarantine, but what's the Lord been teaching you today? What's he been showing you? Maybe some of what you've already answered, but what's the Lord showing you right now?
I'd probably say impact. You know, like,
okay,
you can fall under the trap. I can. And I'm sure people who are listening, you can fall into the trap of thinking that you're, one, not impactful, or two, you have a small impact, or three, no one cares about your impact. And that's such a lie. And the quarantine has taught me, like, man, my impact on our kids and our home is so massive. The words that I use to our kids and the way I use it to our kids, or use them to our kids, is so impactful. And Jason, I don't know if it's going to impact them in 2020. I don't know.
Yeah.
But what God has taught me in quarantine is, you better be sure it's going to impact them in 2030. And you better be sure it's going to impact them in 2040. And the same with my wife, is like, just the way my initial just impact to start the day, how it kind of, you know, flows throughout the day. And what I've really come to understand and kind of crave is my impact horizontally to my kids and my wife is totally dependent on my impact vertically, or God impacting me vertically on a daily basis, you know? And so, sometimes I fall under the trap of, like, thinking, you know, like, I'm not that impactful today, or I you know, what I say here won't be that impactful. And what I realize is, like, man, the impact that my words and my actions can have in a split moment with those around me, social media followers, people on television, I don't know. I can't measure the impact that they can have, and I don't know when they will, but I know that they're going to. That's a fact. And that's been something that God has really placed on my heart through this time.
He is Dan Orlovsky. Of course, you see him on ESPN, the former NFL quarterback. This was a lot of fun, buddy. Appreciate you taking the time. I always appreciate your friendship and all the encouragement you provided for me. Thanks for being here tonight on Sports Spectrum.
You're the best, man. Thank you. The stuff that you guys have done, through this time has really been awesome to pop in and watch what you guys have been a part of. So my kids have started to watch you guys, and especially last week with all the quarterbacks. So it's been awesome, man. So thank you.
And let me hit stop on the record button here. Thank you, buddy.
Thank you.